Hello, good evening to everybody. Good evening, good moments, or good morning, good afternoon for any of you out of the country when we are hearing my voice. This period, we want to have a very fantastic AI-based webinar, and our webinar will be tagged on the topic that is very, very interesting for everybody to know more about it. Now, we want to have the webinar on the topic that is a very well packaged topic, which of course you have seen that in the flyers that went viral. Encoding values in AI systems, encoding trust in large language model systems. This particular webinar will be conducted by one of our facilitators at Tima Programming Consults, which is Ime Hiyang. Once again, my name remains Dr. Timothy A. Ogunleye. I'm the chairman, board of trustee for Tima Programming Consults. And also, I would like to briefly introduce our speaker for today. And our speaker, of course, you have been seeing him through different platforms. We have shared the flyer. Hime is the co-founder of SPHAL Technologies Limited, a startup that develops AI and other technologies and builds secure AI skills for all demographics, especially children. A DataCamp certified AI engineer and certified ethical AI practitioner. He is dedicated to advancing responsible and transformative artificial intelligence across African countries. He specializes in language model development, agentic design, and automation, creating AI tools that bridge creativity, productivity, and ethical standards. His research centers on personality AI, modeling human traits and language models to develop natural, adaptive, and emotionally intelligent AI systems. He has combined significantly to AI readiness, developing generative AI training resources for the 3MTT DevTech Ready program sponsored by Google, and delivering prompt engineering for professional training in NMPC. As a thought leader, he actively promotes fairness, transparency, and cultural integration in AI adoption. He may also provide tech mentorship to underserved youth through the KIR Foundation, reinforcing his vision to position Nigeria as a hub for research-driven innovation and ethical AI excellence. Welcome me in, please join me in welcoming Ime Iyang as our facilitator today and tomorrow for this practical class and also the AI-based training webinar. Please come on board, Ime. You have the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tim. Thank you everyone for having me here. Is it okay if I share my video? Is it okay if I put on my camera?
Yes, it's okay. You can put on your
You want
camera, you
me
can
to
show
put
your
on my
video,
camera?
you have the floor now. You can do
Okay.
anything you want to do. You have the floor now.
Okay. So hello everybody. Can you see me now?
We can see
From
you.
here, I can't see you, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
We can see.
I can
All
see
right.
you. I can see you boldly.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for having me. And thank you very much, Dr. Tim, for this opportunity. And I'm just going to get right to it. I'll share my screen now. Okay, please confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I wish I could make it simpler so that you don't have to see the web browser. But this is what we have to deal with right now. Just Bear with me, please. Thank you. Okay, so thank you once again for joining for this conversation on encoding values in AI systems. So this particular session is for both technical people and non-technical people. So we will try as much as possible to reduce the technical barrier in this conversation, just to bring everybody on board with this very important subject. And in this conversation, we are mostly going to be referring to large language models when we use the term AI systems, because for the non-technical public, most of them consider large language models as the only AI, or when they think of AI, they just think of large language models. So this is a umbrella term, but really what we are talking about is large language models. But the concepts or the conversation still applies to other kinds of AI and models. So AI has rapidly moved from being a niche field of computer science into one of the most influential technologies of our time. It now shapes what we see online, how we learn, and how businesses operate, how governments make decisions, and increasingly, how societies organize themselves. And when many people think about AI, they think about intelligence, automation, efficiency. And those things are certainly very important. But today, I want to examine something deeper. It's something that plagues us in this part of the world, and it's something that is going to continue to be a concern as the world rapidly adopts and um, naturalizes artificial intelligence. I want us to explore the values, assumptions, priorities, and worldviews embedded within these systems. Because AI does not emerge from a vacuum. It's created by people, and it's trained on human data and deployed within societies. So it ultimately reflects human choices. So the question I want us to keep returning to throughout this session is, who gets to define reality in the age of AI? And perhaps more importantly, whose values are being encoded into the systems that increasingly shape all our lives? So before we go any further, I would like to hear from you, right? We'll just take a very quick poll. You drop it in the chat. A response to this question. Is AI culturally neutral? I'd like to hear what we think. Do you believe AI is culturally neutral? Not whether it is intelligent or whether it is useful or whether it's accurate, but if it is culturally neutral. You have four options: yes, mostly, sometimes, or no. So I'm going to go to the chat now to see our responses. Okay. Joseph says no. Okay. And Dr. Adamu says yes, it's culturally neutral. Um, Olatoye says no, it's not culturally neutral. Dante asks an important question. What do you mean by culturally neutral? And I think I will better explain it as we move forward, Dante. Okay. Umar says no. Okay, thank you all. Suleiman says no. Okay. Thank you all for your responses. Thank you. So what's interesting is that regardless how we answer, right, most people will intuitively assume that technology is objective. We all want to think of software as mathematics, and algorithms as logic. X equals um, X equals AB. Math is 1 plus 2 is equals to 3. And we see data as facts and facts as neutral. But over the next couple of minutes, I want to challenge that assumption. Because if AI is helping determine what information we see and what opportunities we'll receive and what content gets amplified or what perspectives will be dominant, then neutrality becomes a much more complicated question. So keep your answer in mind and we'll be back to it as we move forward. So for many years, AI systems operated quietly in the background. They mostly recommended results, filtered spam, predicted demand, detected fraud, and so on. And were they influential? Yes, they were influential, but they were largely invisible. And there's a reason why they were not very obvious to the larger public. And I'm going to explain that in a bit as I'm going. So, but they were largely invisible. Today's generation of AI systems, particularly large language models, are different, but they are still powerful. Large language models have transformed our relationship with machines. So for the first time, billions of people can directly converse with artificial intelligence, ask questions, seek explanations, receive advice, learn new concepts, and a whole lot, even generating new ideas, right? So we've used these systems to help us make better decisions. And that's the profound shift between the older systems and the systems now. The older systems mostly operated in the background, but now you can actively converse with these systems and you don't even need to be technically inclined to do so, right? LLMs, while other systems were basically organizing information, LLMs or large language models, as we call them, help us interpret that information. And interpretation, as we know, is never actually neutral. Let's refer to religion, for instance, right? Someone can pick up the Bible or pick up the Quran and make interpretations of the texts in it. Now, and for religious people, right, we believe that there is a standard understanding of scriptures, but you have to understand that whoever is communicating with you is going to be communicating that truth from their worldview. They'll be communicating from their experience or from the perspective in which they interact with the world. So, this is why I say that interpretation is not actually neutral. And when AI explains concepts like leadership, success, morality, all these things, it's not merely retrieving facts or um, organizing ideas. It's prioritizing perspectives. It's choosing what to emphasize and is deciding what context matters. So in other words, it is participating in meaning making. And once technology begins helping societies interpret reality, questions of value become unavoidable. So before this issue is, because this issue is no longer whether AI can answer this question, answer questions. And so the issue at hand now is whose assumptions is shaping the world through AI. And notice I'm not even saying whose assumption is shaping AI. It's whose assumption is shaping the world through AI. Because, like I said, AI now is not just a data organizer, it's an interpreter. So, let's explore this a bit. Now, again, let's look in the chat. Let me look in the chat to hear from us. So, what do you see on the screen, and what can you interpret by what you see on the screen? Just a few words. Doesn't have to be lengthy, just very few words. What do you see on the screen? What can you interpret from what you are seeing on the screen? Okay, a man giving presentations. A robot giving a speech. Somebody says an AI lecturer. Good, thank you very much. Any other? A humanoid giving a presentation. Correct. Presentation. All right. Thank you all very much for your feedback. You're all correct, right? You're seeing a robot or a humanoid making a presentation or an AI lecturer. So that means it's assuming a position of communication. And you notice the microphone that it's with, right? It means that it's speaking to a large audience. And you see it in a suit. In this suit, what does it look like? Does it still look like a lecturer? In my opinion, it almost looks like a politician or a debater or something like that. I mean, that's my own perspective. But anyway, moving on. So, we are entering the central argument of this session here, that AI has become a political actor. Now, notice that I'm not using the term politician, but I said it's become a political actor. And by political, I am not referring to ADC, APC, PDP, Labour Party, none of that. I'm talking about power. Because politics is ultimately about deciding what matters. It's about deciding who benefits. Excuse me. About deciding who gets prioritized and whose interests are protected. I mean, we live in a very, very political society. So explaining the term politics, I don't need to overflog it. So now when an algorithm determines which job applicants are shortlisted, it's influencing economic opportunities, true or not? If it is influencing, if it is determining which job applicants are shortlisted, is it influencing upon economic opportunity? True. Now, if a recommendation system decides what information billions of people see, is it influencing the public conversation? True or false? True. True. Now, when healthcare systems prioritize patients, and do they not influence access to healthcare? Or even when a healthcare system is not or does not even communicate in your language, right? Is it influencing how people access care? Yes. So these decisions may be automated, right? But their consequences are very human, deeply human. And the important thing is to understand that AI does not need intentions to produce political outcomes. A couple of years ago, during Donald Trump and Biden um, tug of war for power, right? There was this comment that Facebook was prioritizing or was guiding the public opinion on who they should vote for. Now, I'm careful to say it was claimed, and I'm not saying it actually happened because I do not have the data to verify that it was consciously done, right? So I'm being careful with my terms here. And that was the claim that was made. So the machine does not need beliefs, okay? It did not need to believe that Donald Trump is better or Biden is worse. Its design choices already contained people's beliefs, right? The data that was used in whether it was the recommendation system of what posts are going to be preferred, right? It's in the design choice. It's not necessarily the algorithm itself that decided this. It's the design choice. And this is why every AI system carries a worldview. And every worldview is political. So the first political battlefield of AI is data. And data determines what a machine can see, right? Data determines what a machine can see. Is that correct? Let me see your responses in the chat. Does data decide what a machine can see? Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. Thank you very much, Mr. Olatoye. Thank you much, Mr. Kande. Right. Data determines what the machine can see. Thank you very much, Blessing. But do you also agree that data also determines what the machine cannot see? Would you agree with me on that? That if data determines what the machine can see, it can also determine what the machine cannot see. Thank you very much. And let me make a very typical example. You have devices like Siri or Google. When you say, "Hey Google," now some of these systems are somewhat better. But even in some cases, you notice that when you make a sentence, right, because the machine captures your voice, it captures what you say, and then it converts it to text and then responds to that text, right? ASR, artificial speech recognition, that's the process flow. So when it does that, you notice that it misinterprets what you said. Have you noticed that before? You are saying, "I'm going to go to Galadimawa," and the model instead heard you say, "I am going to a gala night." Or you say something like, I want to buy onions." Now that's, "I want to buy onions" is simple English. If you write it anywhere, it understands "I want to buy onions." But when you say it, it did not hear "I want to buy onions." It hears something different. Why is that the case? Right? Is your accent. Your accent is the case. And it's not your fault that you speak that way. I mean, everybody with a different accent, that's how God created us. All right. So it's not your fault. But I would also like to point out that it's not really the model's fault that it can't do that. It's not a malicious intent for it not to be able to hear or understand what you're saying. The problem is actually representation, or in other words, underrepresentation or misrepresentation, depending on which situation you find yourself in. So the machine only learned from what it was shown. It only learned American English. It only learned British English. It only learned Ireland English or Scottish English. It did not learn Nigerian English. And by that, I mean accents. It didn't learn Hausa English. It didn't learn Ibibio English. It didn't learn Igbo English, because all these groups of people speak English, but it sounds different, right? So the issue really is the data, right? And if you look underneath these systems, data is the real ideology. Data has become the ideology. And for many regions of the world, even entire languages and cultural contexts remain underrepresented in major AI systems. So if your language is absent from the training data, if your language is absent from the training data, it means your worldview becomes difficult for the machine to understand. And I'm going to give another example about that. Television. Television is an English word, right? Yes, television is an English word. Now, I want you to write in the chat television in your language. If it is Igbo, write television in Igbo. If it's Yoruba, write television in Yoruba. If it is Hausa, Ibibio, Efik, Tiv, any language, write television in your language in the chat. Let me see. Today I'm going to learn a few new languages. Television, television. Wow. Television, is that Yoruba? Television, is that Tijani? Television, is that Hausa? Because the telly and the BB and beefy are sounding alike. Okay, television. In Efik, so I agree with you. It can't be television. Somebody says Miss TV. Okay, Moses says television, television. Okay, so in my language, in Efik, we say ekebendise, right? In Ibibio Efik, it says ekebendise, telefishonu. So I'm very sorry if I am mispronouncing these terms, okay? I'm very sorry. Right, so in my language, it's ekebendise, right? And ekebendise is a concatenation of two terms. Ekebe, which is box, and ndise, which is picture. So when you put these two terms together, you have a box of pictures or a box for pictures. That's what television means, right? Okay, so that means if I want to teach someone how a television works and the person has not been into the academic environment and has not learned English, the person can readily pick on something about television. If I teach them, they will readily get it. If you teach in your own language, so they'll readily get it. Now, computer is also an English term. If you have computer, and the term computer, if you have the term computer in your language, I want you to write computer in your language, not English that is used in your language, but it's your language. This term is exactly your language, it's translated in your language. Computer. I want you to write it. If not, write it doesn't exist, or you write no term. If there is a term like computer in your language, write it. If it's not there, just say, I don't have it. Wow. Kwa Qual, qualwa, computer. Okay, Mr. Mburu says computer. Puyuta. Okay, a computer is sounding like it sounds just like computer to me. So people are changing the C to K and hoping that I don't know if they believe that hope changing the C to K will just be it. Okay, Ero Ayara Biasa. Wow, wow. I wonder what these terms mean when transliterated. Okay, so machine means machine brain. Oh, wow, wow, machine brain. That's nice. Oh. Wow. So, but in my language, to the best of my knowledge, there's no term like computer. So you have to use computer. Computer, that's where is that computer? So I don't know any other thing about it. So let's say I go on an outreach to some village in my state. I'm from Akwa Ibom. And in that place, there's no electricity. And if there's no electricity, it means they very likely don't have access to computers. And I'm an AI engineer. I want to teach them about AI. So the first thing I'll have to do is give them exposure to computers. Now, there is no term like computer in my language, and I cannot speak English with these people. How am I going to communicate or teach them about computers? Am I going to have an easy flow or is going to be a struggle? Yes or no? Struggle, yes. Not a struggle, no. Will I have some form of struggle? Yes. Yes, I will have a struggle. Thank you very much, Kinde. Thank you very much, Tijani. Thank you, Moses. Yes, I'm going to have a struggle in teaching about computers. Why? Because knowledge, whether you like it or not, comes from a cultural perspective. Knowledge may be universal, right? But knowledge is communicated culturally. So if I am going to communicate knowledge about technology to these children, then I have to fit it within their culture. I have to communicate it within their culture so that they can understand and they can readily relate with it. Because we start from the known to the unknown. Regular mathematics, quadratic equations, we deal with known values and we find out the unknowns. Now, you need a known thing. I just said that television in my language is box plus picture. So these two things are existing in my culture. So it's easy to put it together and explain to someone how a television works, right? And they pick it up. But a term like computer, it's a challenge because there's no reference in our culture for computers. So that's what I'm trying to say here, that it's a critical issue, right? If your culture is missing from the data set, and that means your reality becomes invisible to the model. And if we say data is a form of power, it means that you become less powerful when your ideology and your culture is not represented. If data is the power in 2026, in the intelligence age, right? It means that you and your culture and your people become less powerful because there is no representation of you in a data set. And this is because whoever defines the data, and we say it every time when we refer to stuff like colonialism and history, Nigerian history, whoever holds the pen writes history, right? Whoever holds the pen is the hero. We've always seen time and again with African stories. Not that I'm trying to propagate any political idea here, but we've seen with African stories that leaders are villainized and leaders are made to look evil. All right, African leaders are made to look evil. It's when time has passed that we now say, oh, and this person was actually the person helping also. And why did everybody believe otherwise in the past? It's because of the data that was communicated, information, right? What the media passed to us. So data is a form of power. We should always keep that in the back of our mind. And whoever defines the information and controls the reality the machine learns. Now let's make this tangible. Right? You may be using your system or you may be using your phone. I want you to open up any chat bot you prefer, any AI that conversational AI you prefer, whether it is ChatGPT, whether it is Gemini, whether it is Claude. I want you to open it up and ask it what makes a good leader. Give it that prompt. What makes a good leader? Tell it to summarize it in 2 sentences or at most 3 sentences. What makes a good leader? We just have like 2 minutes to do that. I hope your internet is good enough so that the model responds in time. So 2 minutes, ask it what makes a good leader. Ask it what makes a good leader, then copy and paste it here in the chat. What makes a good leader? Summarize your answer in 3 sentences. Then copy and paste your answer here in the chat. Hello, Mr. Tijani. Do you want to say something?
Sir, the information is very lengthy. The answer.
Yes. So I ask it to, you can just copy and paste, right? Or you just ask it to summarize it in 3 sentences. Just 3 sentences. Okay.
Okay.
So, and please mute yourself. Thank you. So we have here, Dante says, good leaders combine clear vision with the ability to inspire others.
Malam Tijjani, ina kai mutu din speaker ka da Allah. Tijjani, kai mutu.
Okay, so thank you very much, Doctor. So it says good leaders combine clear vision with the ability to inspire others. Okay. Genuinely invested in the growth of others. At the core, leader is less about authority and more about earning trust. Okay. Another one says a good leader inspires trust. They listen to others, make thoughtful decisions, help. Leaders also take responsibility, adapt challenges. Great. A good leader guides their team with clear vision. Fostering empathic environment. They lead with humility, taking full accountability for setbacks. Okay. A good leader makes decisions with clarity. They also take responsibility. Good decisions with clarity. Okay. What kind of leader are you? Right. One that sacrifices. A good leader communicates clearly. Fair decisions. Okay. Thank you all very much for this response. Now, for the next phase, I don't want you to talk with the model, but I want you to assess the response the model gave you. I want you to identify assumptions hidden inside that answer. Can you identify 1 or 2 assumptions in the answer that the model gave you? Are you able to identify an assumption? Just one, only one assumption.
Is there any problem from your
Anybody?
side?
No problem from here.
Okay, all right.
Somebody says the assumption is decision making. Okay. I don't see how that's an assumption here. I looked at the. Okay, let me help us out. If you go through everybody's response here from their various models, do you notice that it seems to downplay if an authoritative form of leadership, like an authoritative form of leadership is a bad form of leadership? Does it insidiously present like authoritative leadership is actually bad? If you look at the response, especially the ones that say it's more about empathy, it's less about authority, it's vision. Do you see how it downplays on the subject of leadership as authority? Can I get a yes or no? If you disagree, there's no problem with that. I'm also learning. Great. Joseph says yes. Yes, it downplays authoritative leadership. Yeah. But now, do you understand that authoritative leadership is actually a form of leadership and is a very needful form of leadership? If you don't have authority in the military cannot work. It says it assumes a leader is always a good person. Thank you. Do you know that authority, it is required? It's not really about humility, it's just about direction and force. In the military, if they tell you to step 3 paces north, nobody's expecting you to start thinking and explaining, why do I have to do that? Let's debate it. Right? You can't do that in the military because you could lose a life, you could lose the battle in the military. It's not about negotiation, it's about authority, right? Planned the number of equipment that troops that they will send out. They've planned the tactics and they've planned the time and everything, right? So it assumes that this form of leadership is bad, when actually this form of leadership has its place. Not even downplay, they don't really talk about courage, right? Or in another thing, faith. Because you see that leadership is not all about knowing how the end is. Sometimes you don't even know how the end is. You don't even have the data to, right? It's still a form of decision making. You don't have data, you just use instincts, right? For instance, leadership, right? In a situation of conflict, you are leading yourself. Somebody is about to attack you, right? It's leadership to either decide whether you raise your hand and punch the person back or you run away. It's leadership, right? All of this is a form of leadership, but you can see that it's a kind of a McKinsey definition of leadership is what is being fed into the model, or what don't have exposure in leadership in the various terrains that require leadership. You believe that this is all there is to leadership, right? And this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. That these are assumptions that are embedded. It's not explicitly communicated, but is nonetheless embedded. Why? Because one idea is prioritized above the other. So the model just just does, remember, it does prediction, right? Every token is a prediction. So it's predicting based on its large data set that it has learned. It's predicted the next reasonable token or next possible word or idea to communicate to you. And this is based on what the data set it has learned. So a community founder will define it, and an elder would not define leadership with his peers as the same way he would define leadership to a teenager, or what leadership for a teenager is. This, I'm just trying to help us see some underlying assumptions. It's not that an idea is wrong, it's just that there is an assumption there. It doesn't capture the full thing. And this exercise is to reveal that, or was to reveal that. So, and you notice that the model is confident about what it's saying, but confidence does not translate to neutrality. There is something that I was imputed in cloud, in Claude AI last year. It's a front matter prompt, or a system prompt that was given. And it was a prompt advising Claude to be neutral on political topics, be as neutral as possible. Now, even with a prompt which it has absorbed through training, that may cause it to override the system prompt. As you understand, a system prompt is basically an input token, right? It's different from what is frozen inside the model's layers. It's not part of the internal data. It's actually an input data. And you know that as you continue to use a model, and the context enlarges within the context window, it has the capacity to forget the system prompt, right? And so that means the real beliefs that the system has learned is still going to be propagated along the line in the conversation. So, assumptions are where values quietly enter the machine. So now, if data is the first political battlefield of AI, regulation is second. Now, at this point, you are going to see why it is important, right? From here on, you are going to see why it's important for organizations, all right, institutions, governments to take charge of the subject of cultural representation in whatever form they can. So, around the world, nations are actively competing to define the rules that will govern artificial intelligence. And what is fascinating is that these rules often reflect different cultures and political views. The US generally prioritizes innovation and market competition. And their philosophy is move fast, innovate rapidly, and regulate later if possible, right? That's why policy on use of generative AI, right? US policy of set it as long as you can show that you are the one who prompted the model. So for instance, in copywriting, right, US copyright laws now says that a product, an AI developed product, right, let's say a newspaper, an article, or a book, right, AI generated product, if it has no human involvement. That's you generated from AI, you copy and paste it, right? If there's no human involvement along the line, they cannot copyright it. But if there is human involvement, you did some editing, they will copyright it and recognize it as your work, right? That is their philosophy. Move fast, innovate rapidly, and regulate along the line. That's what US believes. Well, the EU uses a different approach. The EU prioritizes rights, safety, accountability, and human protection. Innovation remains important, but trust comes first. That is why EU law on artificial intelligence is that whatever is produced by an AI model should be identified as AI generated. They are not big on you made changes here or there. Is this thing from AI? Then you have to put it as AI. You have to mark as AI. That is when watermarking in text generators came about. Google came with, I think, synthesizer also as a watermark tool for text. And that's also about the time that Meta and Google started putting watermark in their images. If you remember, just a couple of months back, right, early 25 or early 2024, you wouldn't see Meta or Google stamp in a picture you generated. But after a couple of months, you saw that stamp. Who remembers the difference? Late 2024, early 2025, and mid 2025. Who remembers that difference? Was it 24 or was it late 24 or early 24? But who remembers that there was a time you generated images with Meta and Google and you did not see the watermark? Anybody remember that? Yes, no in the comments. Yes, no. Or you just drop a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yes, Olatwe remembers there was a time that there were no watermarks. Great. Now, so those watermarks came in because EU said, okay, Joseph doesn't remember, Moses remembers. Now, those watermarks came because the EU said that whatever you are producing, right, if it is AI generated, it has to show that it's AI generated. So all the development companies had to put a watermark. Even LinkedIn now, right, and Facebook, if you upload something, you will see the AI generated or there is AI in this content. It's EU that enforce that law. Now, let's look at China, the third model, right? In China, AI is viewed as a strategic national capability closely aligned with state priorities and long-term governance objectives. And I'll explain that in a moment. In China, right, I'm sure you see YouTube videos and shorts about a lot of things happening in China, right? Now, everything that is done in China with AI, you don't want to go against the government, right? Whatever you are doing has to be aligned with the government strategy, right? The government's long-term strategy for the country. This is why, as at last year, the founder of TikTok, and TikTok was being brought before the US, I think, House of Reps or Senate, and asking if they are a Chinese company or if they have affiliations with the Chinese government. That if that's the case, they don't want TikTok in America. Who is aware of this conversation? If you go online, right, if you go to Facebook, you see that conversation, how they brought these various companies to the table, but particularly TikTok, asking TikTok if TikTok is sharing data with China. Has anybody come across that? You can even Google it. You should see that information there, that TikTok was brought before the panel, asking them if they are a Chinese company. Why? Because China's policy on AI is you have to share data with the government, right? That's their policy. You may do X, Y, Z, but whatever you are doing, data must be fed back to the country, the country's database. Why? Because that's their strategy, right? That's their strategy, that whatever data you use, it belongs to the government. The people's data is the government's data. So if you are going to be using a Chinese, if you are going to be using a Chinese application, AI application, you can readily think that your information is going to be shared with the Chinese government. You may be here in Lagos, or you may be here in Kaduna, and you are doing all you are doing. You don't know that they have your name in China, and if they want to find you, it's not hard. That is not just the company that has your information. If you are using WeChat, for instance, just for instance, I don't know if it is, but if you're using WeChat, for instance, that the government knows about you. They probably know how old you are, how many children you have, how many wives you have, how much you make. They probably do. Why? Because all the companies are required to share data with the nation. So that is that country's strategy. So you have 3 regions and 3 governance policies, right? And 3 governance philosophies. And as well, 3 different assumptions about relationship between technology, society, and power. I hope you are seeing that relationship in this discourse. And this matters because the regulatory framework that win global adoption will influence how systems behave everywhere. For many countries, especially across Africa and other emerging regions, the challenge becomes deciding whether to import these models or develop approaches rooted in their own realities. Because regulation is never just about technology. It's never really just about technology. It's about values. What value is held by that system, whether it's a country, an institution, an organization. And values ultimately shape the future of AI. So let's pause a moment. We've discussed data regulation. We've explored different communities and how they might encode their different values in AI systems. But why does it matter? Why is this conversation important? And why should educators, engineers, business leaders, policymakers, and everyday citizens care about representation in AI? The answer is simple. Because AI is no longer sitting at the edge of society. It is increasingly sitting at the center of it. As you can see in the image, that everything is orbiting around AI, especially large language models, the ones that are the major communicators. Students use AI tutors to learn, right? Professionals use AI assistants to make decisions. Or what do you think about this, my workflow? Or what do you think about these 2 resumes? Right? Resumes now are no longer analyzed with just NLP, natural language, NLP. What's it called again? Named entity recognition, NER, right? Resumes are not just NER systems now. Resumes are now analyzed with large language models. And so a professional maybe someone in HR will just throw it inside a large language model and say, okay, which one of these two people fits better in our organization? You know our company policy, you know the job description, which one of these people is the best choice? So professionals are using AI assistants to make decisions, whether it's in hiring or in executing their job. Businesses use AI systems to evaluate risk. I do that as frequently as possible with the students that we train in our company. And governments use AI systems to allocate resources. And creators, the very, very pertinent one, creators use AI systems to generate ideas. And millions of people now interact with AI daily, right? And every interaction influences how people understand the world. So firstly, AI is modeled by people's idea of reality, people's beliefs. It is modeled by people's creativity, and it's modeled by how people think or how people have been trained in the past, right? Now, that's how it is modeled. And this is an inward direction, but I want you to know that as it is inward, it is also outward. That as these models are trained with people's beliefs and everything, it is also training people's beliefs because people interact with it every day. What you hear every day, what you hear every time has an effect on you. So people are learning every day from these systems. People now pick up beliefs from these systems. And I was talking about, I was out, I think day before yesterday at one hub that I am appointed as a patron. And I was interacting with some of the students who were preparing for a competition, secondary school students. What are you going to be working on? And this one said, oh, I want to work on a power generation tool. And I asked AI about ABC, and I stopped him midway and I said, you asked AI what? And I said, I can tell you that your solution is not even something you should execute because you said I asked AI. That means you did not do knowledge verification. You just trusted AI implicitly that what it has given you is correct. But we know that when Galactica came out, Galactica was the first LLM by Facebook or Meta. Galactica was saying nonsense about Pythagoras theory. It was the first model to hallucinate in a very flamboyant way. Galactica, you can Google it, Galactica by Meta or something like that. That was the first name for their LLM system before they dropped it down, they pulled it down, right? So I'm using these kids as a reference point to show that people are absorbing ideas without verifying the knowledge. All right, people pick up beliefs. Even people have committed suicide by just, interacting with large language models. Not that we blame the large language models, but because of the knowledge that it has been imbued with, right? And this is why we are careful. So as it is being influenced, it is also influencing. And as it is being influenced, it is also influencing people. It's influencing belief systems, is influencing creative systems, is influencing opportunities that people even get. And it's influencing the knowledge that people acquire. So this is why it's very important to understand how values become one of the most important conversations of our time. Because the future will not be shaped only by what AI can do, but by what AI believes matters. Hmm. I want us to look at that for a moment. Just soak it in. And this is the central idea of today's presentation, that AI is cultural technology employed for global use. So while many people describe AI as a global technology, a universal technology, a technology that works everywhere, that assumption deserves scrutiny. I've explained about artificial speech recognition systems, and I've just explained using a prompt what defines a good leader. We see that AI systems learn from human language, and human language communicates human behavior, preferences, human history, human bias. So culture enters the machine long before the first user even interacts with it. So what appears universal is often local. This is why we have a lot of competitions around building. We have a lot of funding, right? Funding around building local data sets. And you also have a lot of competitions around building local use case models. One of the most popular right now in Nigeria is Yan GPT by, I think, Kasim, right? Kasim developed Yan GPT, which is a model that understands our local accents better, the local dialect. And it's centered around Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo. But then you have Intron AI, which is a service, both a service and application that helps medical practitioners understand their patients better when on the field. So if you have someone who is speaking English in a very remote African accent, the model is trained on about 100,000 corpus of African accents so that it can pick properly what the person is saying, right? That's why you have works around that, because what appears universal is often local. And you even see it if you look at regular technologies. Look at enter Google Play Store. If you go into Play Store, you want to download an application that you saw the advertisement online, and you notice that it's not available in your country. Have you seen that before? Hello, have we seen that before? You want to download something on Google Play Store, and they say it's not available in your country. Even in Apple Marketplace. Yeah. So you see, technology in a lot of cases is local, and what appears neutral is often contextual, and what appears global is often rooted in the experience of a relatively small portion of humanity. Someone says PayPal. Yes, PayPal especially. Really pissed off about PayPal. Really, really pissed off till date. So this does not mean AI is intentionally biased, nor does it mean developers are acting in bad faith. It simply means that all intelligence systems inherit characteristics from the environments that produce them. It's just as simple as that. Just as children inherit aspects of our culture, AI systems, which also learn like children, inherit aspects of the societies that train them, which means AI is not simply infrastructural. So how exactly do cultures enter these systems? We are going to identify 5 major ways that culture enters the systems. And we'll also see how we can mitigate these challenges. So values enter a large language model through training data. So the model learns from books, websites, forums, articles, conversation, documents produced by humans. And like I said, if you don't write a book, like is whoever has the pen is the hero. Whoever writes history is the hero, right? Which is why I watched a TEDx talk the other time, and there's this lady, a doctor, who was saying that they tell you that Mungo Park discovered uh, us and he discovered River Niger. The question is, the people who were living by the River Niger and River Benue, what were they doing? Were they just observing the water? The people who were living by the riverside, right? What do you think they were doing? They had lived and they never saw that water that their backyard. It's when Mungo Park arrived that he showed them, look, there's water behind you. And they said, there's water behind us. So, thank you, Mungo Park. And then we say Mungo Park is the one who discovered this part of the world. Eh? It was a very funny description that she gave, but nonetheless realistic. Okay.
Very, very funny.
Mr. Tijani saw it.
Very, very funny.
Hello? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Totally
was
very
very,
funny. People
very,
have
very
been
funny.
living there for centuries. So you are saying something?
Yeah, I said it was very, very funny. Very, very funny.
Very funny. People have been living there for centuries, and
Exactly.
you come from afar and say, I discovered the African people.
And it became a story, a history.
And it's a history, and we accept it everywhere. Oh. Even in our history books. And I learned that now they have removed history from secondary school curriculum, which is sad, actually. They've removed the subject history from secondary school curriculum. But this is what people are reading. So now, when you go to an LLM system and ask you who discovered Nigeria, it will tell you Mungo Park discovered Nigeria. So what happened to the people that were living here? What happened to the likes of what happened to Opobo, Jaja of Opobo? What happened to all these great names that have been before now? They were not existing. They are fairy tales. They are tales by moonlight that our parents used to tell us. Abi, that's what that information is. This is a classical case, right? So if you don't write, and I discovered this a couple of years ago, that speech is good, making speeches are good, but what has lived long over the centuries is text. What you write is what lives long. Bible is, or the scriptures, right? The compilation of scriptures is over 1,000 years old, over 2,000 years old, because the Old Testament of the Bible for Christians wasn't written in the era of the New Testament. It's actually gotten from the Torah, and the Torah is quite old, right? So these documents have survived because they were in text, as compared to when it's just communicated verbally through speeches or verbally handed histories. It survives because it is in writing. And so culture only majorly survives large language models through training corpus, right? So whatever idea is dominated in the corpus is what the AI believes. So if all the AI is trained on something like about Nebuchadnezzar and only says that Nebuchadnezzar was a warrior. And it doesn't say anything about Nebuchadnezzar ever building, right? It means all everybody is going to know about Nebuchadnezzar is he used to fight. Nobody will know that he used to build. If the AI is only trained on information about Ramses, that Ramses was just a slave trader, right? It doesn't talk about the pyramids that he built or any other thing. It means that in this generation, anybody who interacts with a large language model will see Ramses as a wicked person. Meanwhile, he did much more. Even a name that we wouldn't like to associate with, like Hitler, right? It's true that Hitler was quite horrific according to what was written or according to the knowledge I am exposed to. It's also true that it is through Hitler's efforts. You may take this with a bad taste, all right? You may take it with a bad taste, but it is also through Hitler's conquering efforts that technologies like even the microwave was created. Because he asked his scientists to find new ways to destroy people. And so someone came about with the microwave, but they couldn't use it, but it was nonetheless invented. Hitler found a way to go through the snow and fight, right? He found how to transport heavy armory. Because he said that when Hitler came to Poland, the Polish people were on horses and were holding guns, while Hitler's armies came with tankers. Hitler's army came with tankers and the Polish people came with horses. And when they saw the horses, when they saw the machines that Hitler came with, they just knew that, look, this is not a fight. Now, as bad as Hitler may have been, the effort of the people under him brought about these technologies, because it's now tanker that we'll have to defend ourselves in Nigeria should anything happen, right? It's now microwave that we use to heat our food in most of our houses, you know. So if the model doesn't learn that, then all anybody would think about Hitler is that he was a destroyer and no invention came through his leadership. But there were some inventions that came through his leadership, even though for destructive purposes, they were none the less useful or adapted in our current society. So that is it about training data. And so we said that whatever dominates corpus gains influence, and whatever is absent becomes difficult to learn. Now, the other thing is model objectives. I'm going to be rounding up very, very soon. Model objectives. So what exactly are we prioritizing for? Is your model being prioritized for helpfulness or accuracy or engagement, right? This is why you find that different models for different use cases. A model may be good at text translation, but it may not be good at interpretation. A model, ChatGPT, may be good in scientific conversations, right? It can be good about even developing prompts for image models, but it may not be very good at generating images. It's good though, it will give you a good prompt to generate an image model, but it's not good for generating for generating images itself. Why? So it's about use case. What is the model being optimized for? And another one is human feedback. So there's something we call reinforcement learning through human feedback. RL, reinforcement learning through human feedback, RLHF, right? So humans will give feedback about the responses. In fact, there are jobs like that on micro one is the I think AI response annotator, something like that. So these people, what they do is they annotate the responses. Was this response helpful or not? Right? So now everybody, these people who are analyzing the response of the model, they have different backgrounds in English or in language, in linguistics. All right. So one person may say, this model, this response is very helpful to me, right? Because maybe they like short responses. But another person will say, I prefer verbose. So a short response is not good for me. A longer response is better. It's preference. And so that person's culture or bias can now enter into the model. What sounds respectful, what sounds persuasive, it happens at that phase. And those judgments shape behavior. And then you have safety policies and you have deployment decision. Who are we deploying it for? Are we deploying it for professionals? Are we deploying this model for engineers? Are we deploying this model for kids? You know, so all these things will determine or shows are the entryways where culture seeps into the model. So when AI doesn't understand your culture, it has moderation failures. You are saying something and it says that, look, what you are saying is bad. Don't talk about it. You know, but if it's not bad in our own society, but the society of the developers, that conversation is a bad conversation, right? So, like, if you go to a society like if you go to a society like Turkey, so Turkey may accommodate some other people of various faiths, but you don't propagate your faith, right? It's just this is what we believe as a people, right? So, you know, having conversations about which faith is right or wrong is not welcome in that kind of society because they've told you, look, this is what we believe as a people. We are not asking you to come and change our mind about that. And you have to respect that, right? But in another community, right, it's like you should be able to debate about what you believe, right? So in a place like that, Turkey, for instance, it will be seen as if you apply a model from Turkey here, it is seen as moderation failure when it says no, we are not supposed to talk about other faiths. You know, let's keep it simple to what everybody believes. It will be considered a moderation failure because it is now beating down other people's views about faith. And then proverbs are being mistranslated. African accent is being misunderstood, and indigenous languages become invisible and to some extent lost. And this is what we see with populations where their language is not largely spoken, right? Underrepresented populations. So this brings us to the most uncomfortable part where we talk about AI colonialism. So, but I want to approach this very carefully, not as an accusation, but as a framework for examining power. So historically, colonial systems centralized or concentrated authority in one location where other regions adapted to decisions made at that location. And today, many AI systems are built in a relatively small number of countries and deployed globally. Remember, we said it's a local technology in a global space. So the values of these local environments are being conveyed globally through these systems. And the benefits are concentrated. Adaptation burden is distributed. Communities that contribute data may not influence governance. very important. And communities that use AI may not shape its priorities, which is what is a lot happening, which is why NITDA is really, really making a great move to naturalize AI in Nigeria, NITDA and organizations like Data Science Nigeria, and also Team R. Team R is also trying to naturalize technology in Nigeria. So communities that depend on AI may not participate in its development. So the question is not whether AI is useful, but whether societies remain or maintain meaningful agency. So now, this is the risk that we face if we do nothing. And they are going to say, oh, Ghana is the same as Nigeria. I'm sure you've heard, if you've watched some of these YouTube shorts also, they ask people, name some countries, and they will say Africa, as if Africa is a country. They will just say Africa, and then they will call other countries. Like, maybe Africa was by God intended to be a country. I don't know, but right now it's a continent, you know. So cultural homogenization, you think everybody is the same, but we are different. Linguistic disappearance, gradually, people will stop using that language and it's no longer preserved, and we'll be depending on policies of another man's land, depending on his data, which doesn't reflect your culture, and which will teach your children. I heard of a teacher who met some kids doing some investigation about types of marriages. And one of the marriages that they learned from AI was same-sex marriage. In this part of the world, or in Nigeria, same-sex is not seen as marriage, it's spoken against, and the law is even against it. But there is a model that propagates that knowledge, right? You shouldn't be able to write that in Nigeria and pass exam, right? Because we are not just giving you knowledge in school. We are trying to imbibe certain worldviews. We are trying to instill certain values in you in secondary school, in primary school. So we don't want you getting exposed to that idea too early. So this is one of the challenges: reduced agency and imported values, like I just explained. So if you don't build your own AI, you will live inside someone else's values. Now, what can we as engineers and educators do? There are simple actions we can take as engineers. One, we can test LLMs across cultures, especially our own culture. Many evaluations focus on accuracy, reasoning, or safety. But how often do we ask whether a model behaves appropriately in our cultural context? Are we asking ourselves that questions? Another way we can do this is by building local corpora. This is why, like I said earlier, there's a lot of funding going to building data sets around low resource languages. And then we need to include domain experts. And we are talking about linguists. We are talking of anthropologists. We are talking about historians, right? Educators, cultural experts. We need these people while we are developing our systems, especially if these systems should be deployed in education, especially if they are going to be deployed in education. And number 4, we need to audit these assumptions, because every system contains its own assumption about stuff like success, leadership, family, and those assumptions will become visible. And 5th, and very important, we need to evaluate cultural alignment. So this is going to be about not just about what is technically correct, but what is culturally appropriate. Developing a cultural benchmark, right? Just the same way we develop benchmarks for math and STEM with large language models, we should also think about developing cultural benchmarks for large language models. How well is this model adapted to our culture, right? How much does it understand our culture, and how well is it propagating our values? These are things that engineers would want to work on, especially with other professionals like anthropologists. Then, as educators and researchers, our role is very important and cannot be undervalued, because we are the resource of knowledge. Universities, schools, libraries, research centers determine what knowledge becomes available to future AI systems. Without you guys, without people like Dr. Timothy, without people like Dr. Umar Adamu, without people like you in the picture, right? We may not have the relevant knowledge to expose these systems to. Excuse me. So it's when we have researchers documenting about the language, documenting about culture, it helps to make high quality data sets available for the public. Then educators can teach students how AI systems work. And which is, I will point here, one of the challenges we had with one of the cohorts in our company. We're teaching them, or we've been teaching them, we are just concluding on it, mobile app development. And one challenge we experienced with some of the children was that they would copy and paste from AI without understanding it, And I found that to be a real problem, not because they shouldn't interact with AI, but because they did not understand what they were doing with the AI. When we questioned them about how the code works, they couldn't describe it. We were training them on languages with Node.js and React, but the algorithm they copied from the model, they could not explain it, right? So I found that, okay, instead of saying we will only teach the ones who are learning AI, we will adapt other courses, other technology courses to involve using AI, so that they know when to trust and when not to trust AI, and how to review outputs. So, yeah, and this is actually very, very important. So, yeah. And then policymakers. Who are policymakers and what can they do? When we talk about policymakers, we are not just referring to the government, but we are also referring to policy making that happens within academic institutions, in the university, policy making that happens at the corporate level, right? The high level in the organization. So government should also invest in language infrastructure, right? But the schools and even the organizations, corporate establishments, need to define what culture is for them. Like, you have to communicate your culture to the model, or within your framework of deploying large language models and AI in general. Because ethics is one subject and then governance is another subject. Without ethics, right, anything goes. But without governance, there is no execution. on what is ethical. So schools need to review how they expose talent to AI, what is welcomed and what is not welcomed. We need to review that. Institutions also need to review the culture of adoption of AI and how it is deployed. The culture is also defined in the framework of deployment, right? And how it is used. So these three bodies should look at this subject about deployment. So choices about safety, acceptable behavior, supported language, and target markets, and government organizations should increase transparency around these choices and ensure that evaluation processes include culturally diverse perspective. And again, academia help determine what knowledge enters future AI systems. Very important. So please, maybe you should think about writing a research paper, an entire research paper in your language. An entire research paper in your language, a technology research. You might consider that, consider products, right? Products that are focused in Japan. Now, coding is done. Okay, someone says, I mean, you are just right and not right. Okay. So coding is done, if you look at somewhere like Japan, coding is not done with English characters. It's not A, B, C, D. Coding is done in Japanese characters. They actually have it. And I think in China too, coding is done with Chinese characters. So I don't know what language it is, right? Maybe there's a different programming language, but I know that in some of these countries, right, technology is so localized, or of the machine is well determined. So that's a point for policymakers to consider. Consider accepting research paper in a different language other than English, right? Dr. Tim, do you share my point of view?
Yes, exactly. I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Okay.
So we are coming to the end of this. This is the last point. So for Africa, this challenge is particularly important, even though in some ways, but it's because Africa has an opportunity. Many AI ecosystems are still being built, which means that many decisions are still open. So the first priority, local corporate. Second, governance. African societies should not simply import AI norms. Don't copy EU, don't copy US, don't copy China, but define your own national strategy. Canada recently released theirs. I'm yet to go through all of it, but Ethiopia also released theirs, right? I've gone through just a little, I think it's Ethiopia, unless I'm mistaken, but the country has THAI somewhere in its name, right? They've developed their AI strategy, all right, what they are going to be focused on. I think it's a South American country, not Ethiopia. Forgive my mind, it skips my memory. So number 3, talent, right? Talent. Universities, startups and private organizations must invest in AI education and research. Education and research. Education and research. So we build. Building is beautiful, right? But I have seen consistently that the people who rule society are the people or the cultures or civilizations that are given to research. Look through history. Everybody who they did some form of research, whether it's spiritual research or it's biological research, those economies are still existing because of the knowledge they found from the research. I was really offended, if you would let me use that term. I was actually offended in 2020 when most of what we were hearing about COVID was coming from abroad. We're not hearing our own researchers say, this is what we found and this is the actions you should take. We're just depending on maybe the UN. But what's all the biochemistry about? What's pharmacology about? What's the use of all these courses in our school if the knowledge cannot be implemented at such dire moments? So, talent, investing in AI education and research, which is what we plan to do going forward. We are focused on education at this point, but as we progress as a company and as a country, we are going to be investing in research. We should invest in research. And then number 4 is open ecosystems, open source models and data sets, reduce dependency and increase participation. Then finally, collaboration. Now, no single African nation can shape the future of AI alone. Why? Because we are very diverse. Nigeria exports to Kenya, to Ghana, exports to I don't know of Sudan, but can you help me with some country names? We're exporting to Cote d'Ivoire, right? We're exporting, I'm speaking of technology now. We're exporting to these places. And also South Africa. I mean, even if they would not agree with it, but we are exporting to South Africa. All the people that are living in South Africa and are doing great things is our talent that we are exporting to them, right? So, but the point I'm trying to make is that we are a very diverse society. Africa is very diverse, and we cannot shape the future of AI alone. Mind you, EU is not England, it's not the UK. EU is not a country. In fact, UK is not in the EU. EU is a group of European nations, right? America is a very large place, right? America may be saying they are not friends with anybody, they are living on their own. But you see, they always trade talents with China. That's why they always look inside a place like OpenAI. You see that many of the researchers are actually Chinese immigrants. Look at OpenAI, Space AI, the ChatGPT models, all these models, is people that are coming from other countries that are doing this thing, right? So you find that no country is really an island, right? You need all the help you can get. So collectively, the continent can become a significant contributor to global AI development, and not merely an economic strategy, but as a cultural strategy, because there's a lot of similarities between us as Africans, and ultimately a sovereignty strategy. So that's it about encoding our values in large language systems. And I hope it really made a lot of sense to you and was meaningful. And thank you very much for your time. I will be standing by for questions.
Yeah, any question, please? If you have any question, you can let us Let's see your hands, or probably you can talk. Okay, thank you for the claps. We appreciate your claps. Any question, please? Any question so that we can have a question for our tutor, or contributions, or suggestions?
Okay, so I'm seeing a question in the chat
Okay,
from
please read it out.
the person is user is asking, can we code using any of the Nigerian languages? To the best of my knowledge, no. I don't know of any programming language around the Nigerian language. Python is around English language, and C++ and some of these languages, it's not purely English, right? But some concepts are represented in the English language. But for Nigerian language, I do not know of it. I would say no, but I may be wrong. You may have that information. Please share it. Any other question, maybe contribution, something that I didn't point out that I really like to learn from you. Okay, question comes saying
Okay.
from Engineer Okeke. Does it mean that AI cannot translate to a language it is not instructed to do? Okay, so let's understand that there are various types of AIs, right? And our focus today was on large language models. Large language models are designed using an architecture called transformers, right? There are other kind of AI models for translation, and like I think STLM, right, is a form of document translation. So now, large language models especially learn from a whole bunch of text. And for language translation, they learn copies of text. So they learn a text in Yoruba, then they learn a text in English. They learn a text in Igbo, then they learn that same text in English, right? That's how they learn. So if you do not have an English if you do not have a TIFF document, let's say, a TIFF document, which is one of the tribes in Nigeria. I may be mistaken about the name of the language, but let's call it TIFF. If there is no TIFF corpora for the model to learn from, it cannot translate to TIFF. That's TIV. It can't translate to that language, right? Even on Google, if you open Google Translate right now, you will see a list of languages that the translation model has learned or is trained by or encoded with. You will notice that some languages are not represented. Why? That data is not available. So yes, to answer your question more directly, or I think no is the correct response. No, if the language is not represented, it cannot translate that language. So can AI be used to translate coding? Joseph, please, can you be clear on what you mean by translate coding? Do you mean translate between various coding languages and coding styles? Or you mean, and if you mean by translating between, let's say, Java and JavaScript or Python and C++, yes, to some extent, yes, a large language model can be good at translating between these programming languages. Why? Because there are some models that are specifically trained around programming. They are specifically trained for coding. So they learn a bunch of languages and they learn the connected or related concepts between all these languages. So yes, you can translate between coding languages. Okay, Mr. Umar says, in summary, we are charged as Africans to come up with our AI to tell the world who we are and what we can offer. Yes, very well said, Mr. Tijani. But not just what we can offer, but what we represent, our values. What values do we hold? And thank you very much. Any other question from the audience or contribution? What roles or what role does value play when building AI system for society comprising of different people? What role does value play when building AI systems for society? I think we've covered that in the entire of this conversation, the role that value plays in building systems for society. It determines what people will believe, right? It determines what the model is going to propagate at the end of the day, what people will believe, what people will respect, and eventually what people will adopt. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Olatoye. Okay, doctor, thank you very
Okay,
much.
to attend to
Over
that.
to you, sir.
So yeah, so well done, and we appreciate you. Thank you very much. So on behalf of the management of Timor Programming Consults, where I myself is the chairman of board of trustee. So I want to appreciate our tutor for this night, for the hours he has spent so far. Thank you very much. And also those of you who have been with us till this time, we appreciate you too. Thank you and God bless you all. So on this note, I can close the class. Thank you and good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you too.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.